To survive on the planet, a human man had to marry a native woman. Ethan Brooks was not used to losing. He had always been careful, always prepared. As a human explorer for the Interstellar Research Division, he had traveled to planets that were empty, barren, or strange. Veli, the planet he was now visiting, was supposed to be another routine mission. He was sent to study its atmosphere, check for minerals, and test soil samples. No one expected anything dangerous. The flight began smoothly. Ethan's small shuttle glided over green and purple plains. Massive trees stretched to the sky, with strange vines curling around them. Rivers shone like liquid glass, but he noticed something odd. The rivers moved too fast, as if the water was alive. Ethan took samples and recorded everything. His instruments warned him about unusual energy readings, but he shrugged. Most of the planet's energy storms were harmless. Then it hit. A sudden burst of violet light struck his shuttle from nowhere. The controls went wild. Alarms screamed. Ethan gripped the chair and tried to stabilize the ship, but it was too late. The shuttle spun violently, tearing through the clouds. He activated the emergency landing system, but it barely helped. Metal twisted, wires sparked, and with a terrible crash, the shuttle fell into a thick forest. Ethan was thrown forward. Pain hit his shoulder and leg. He groaned, trying to move. The smell of smoke and burning circuits filled the air. The shuttle was broken beyond repair. He looked around. Thick trees surrounded him, and strange sounds echoed in the distance. Small glowing creatures flew past, leaving trails of light. The sky was a dark green, and the wind carried a strange, heavy scent. Ethan realized he was far from any help. He dragged himself out of the shuttle. Blood ran down his leg, but he had to keep moving. He knew that if he stayed still, the planet would kill him. He limped through the forest, using his survival training to avoid sharp plants and poisonous insects. After hours, exhaustion forced him to rest. He found a dry patch near a strange rock formation. He cleaned his wounds with what little medical supplies he had. Night fell quickly on Veli. The air grew cold, and the forest came alive with sounds. Large animals with glowing eyes stalked the shadows. Ethan stayed still, hoping they would ignore him. He ate a small ration and tried to sleep. Sleep did not come easily. Every sound made him jump. He knew he needed shelter and water before the planet destroyed him. On the second day, Ethan began exploring again. He found a stream and drank carefully after filtering the water with his portable kit. He noticed that the plants here moved when he touched them. He almost panicked at first, but then realized they were harmless. Something about this planet was strange but beautiful. He wondered if anyone else had survived here before him. By the third day, Ethan's supplies were running low. He had to find food. He used his sensors to detect edible plants. Some berries were sweet and safe. He caught small animals using traps he made from broken shuttle parts. Each meal gave him energy, but the wounds on his body made every movement painful. He felt the loneliness of the forest. No human would find him here for weeks, maybe months. Then he heard voices. At first he thought he imagined it. The voices were soft, almost musical, and they seemed to come from everywhere. Ethan froze. He could see shapes moving in the distance, figures walking upright, covered in clothes made of leaves and animal skins. They looked human, but their skin had a faint shimmer. Their eyes were unusually bright. Ethan stepped out carefully. He wanted to show he meant no harm. "Hello," he called in his human voice. The figures stopped. One stepped forward. She was tall and strong with sharp eyes. Her hair was long and dark. She raised her hand as if to stop him. The other villagers watched silently. Ethan realized they were cautious, maybe afraid. The woman spoke in a language he did not understand. He tried simple gestures, pointing to his wounds and then to himself. The woman's expression softened slightly. She nodded, motioning for him to follow. Ethan limped behind her. They led him through the forest to a village he could not have imagined. Huts were made of living wood, shaped like giant mushrooms. Vines acted as doors and small lights floated in the air, giving a soft glow. The villagers surrounded him. They examined him carefully. Ethan noticed that they had rules, signs of order, and a strong sense of community. The woman who led him, Leela, seemed to be their voice. She motioned for Ethan to sit. An elder, a tall man with silver hair, approached. He spoke in the same strange language, but he looked at Ethan with serious eyes. Ethan shook his head. He could not understand. Then Leela spoke slowly in broken English, surprising Ethan. "You stay, but law must follow. Without wife, no stay, you die." Ethan blinked. He had never expected this. Survive by marrying someone from this village. He wanted to argue, but he could feel the truth in her eyes. She was not threatening him. She was telling the rule. He had no choice. Ethan sat silently, trying to process it. His pride wanted to fight, but his body ached. The forest outside was dangerous. Predators were everywhere. Storms could come without warning. If he refused, he would be left alone to die. He swallowed hard. "I understand," he said quietly. "I will follow the law." Leela nodded. The villagers relaxed slightly. They led him to a small hut where he could rest. They gave him water and food. The food was strange, yet delicious. Ethan noticed it healed him faster than normal rations. The villagers had knowledge of herbs and natural remedies far beyond human science. He realized they had survived here for generations. Over the next days, Ethan began to adapt. Leela taught him how to walk safely through the forest, avoid poisonous plants, and hunt small animals. She spoke little, but each instruction was clear. Ethan tried to learn her language and customs. He watched the villagers work together, each person helping another. The sense of community was strong. He realized that surviving here required respect, patience, and humility. Evenings were the hardest. Ethan felt lonely, far from home, missing Earth and his colleagues. But Leela stayed nearby, always silent but watching. Sometimes she would bring him water or berries without saying a word. Ethan began to notice small things about her. Her careful steps, the way she laughed softly at children playing, her skill with the bow, and her knowledge of healing herbs. She was strong, yet gentle. One night, a loud roar echoed through the forest. Ethan froze. Large shadowy figures ran past, smashing trees. Leela grabbed his arm and pulled him inside the hut. The villagers barricaded the doors. Ethan realized how fragile human technology was compared to the instinct and skill of these people. The night seemed endless. The forest outside growled and screamed, but inside, the villagers kept calm, trusting their rules and their skills. By the fifth day, Ethan had learned enough to move confidently in the forest. He could catch food, climb trees, and recognize safe paths. Yet the thought of marriage weighed heavily on him. He did not know Leela well. The bond was for survival, not for love. He respected her, but he feared the cultural gap. He wondered how he could ever truly belong here. Leela watched him quietly, noticing his struggles. She had been assigned to him, but she did not know if she could trust a human completely. She had seen outsiders destroy worlds before. Yet, Ethan did not carry weapons, and he did not ask for power or control. She saw him trying, learning, and respecting the rules. It gave her hope that maybe humans could be more than destroyers. The days turned into weeks. Ethan healed, adapted, and learned. He realized that survival was not just about food and water. It was about understanding the planet, respecting its life, and trusting those who had lived here for generations. Leela became his guide, showing him the balance of life on Veli. The bond between them was growing slowly, without words, through trust and shared survival. Ethan looked out over the forest one evening, the sky glowing green and purple. He thought of Earth and his old life. He realized that if he wanted to survive, he must accept this world fully, not as an outsider, but as someone connected to it. Marriage was no longer just a law. It was a key to life, a promise that he would not just exist but learn to live. He turned to Leela, who was gathering herbs nearby. She met his gaze, calm and steady. He nodded slightly, a silent thank you. She nodded back. In that moment, Ethan felt something he had never felt before: belonging. The planet was harsh and strange, but it had given him a chance to survive. And surviving on Veli would require more than courage. It would require humility, respect, and perhaps, in time, something deeper than survival. Ethan Brooks woke to the soft glow of the village. The air smelled sweet from the glowing plants that hung above the huts. He could hear children laughing in the distance and the quiet hum of life. It had been weeks since the crash, and he had begun to feel stronger. His wounds had mostly healed, and he could move through the forest without constant fear. Yet a new challenge awaited him, the bond he was required to honor. Leela Morgan appeared at the doorway of his hut. She carried a bundle of herbs and a small water container. She nodded at him, as if reminding him silently of the law that bound them. Ethan rose slowly and offered a small smile. "Good morning," he said quietly. She said nothing, only motioned for him to follow. The villagers gathered in a clearing. A circle of elders waited, their faces serious. One stepped forward, holding a long staff decorated with vines and feathers. Ethan felt the weight of their eyes. Leela walked beside him, calm but strong. He understood this moment was not just about ceremony. It was about trust, survival, and proving his intentions. The elder spoke in the native language. Leela translated slowly. "You must accept bond. You stay together, protect each other. Life depends on it." Ethan nodded, swallowing hard. The words were simple but heavy. He realized that the marriage was not about love yet. It was about survival and responsibility. After the ceremony, Ethan and Leela were expected to live and work together. Leela led him to a small hut near the river. She taught him how to gather water safely, how to identify edible plants, and how to build simple tools from stones and wood. Ethan tried to follow, but he made mistakes. He cut himself while carving a stick, spilled water while carrying containers, and confused edible berries with poisonous ones. Leela was patient, correcting him quietly, but her eyes showed that mistakes could be deadly. The first week was exhausting. Ethan's human habits clashed with native ways. He tried to eat fast, drink too much, and work too hard. Leela stopped him each time. "Slow, learn, listen," she said simply. Ethan realized that rushing would not save him. The planet demanded care and attention. While working in the forest, Ethan began to observe the natives closely. They were strong, careful, and disciplined. Hunters moved like shadows, never making noise. Children learned from an early age to respect the forest and each other. Even elders, though slow, carried themselves with confidence. Ethan felt humble. Humans had technology, but the natives had skill and knowledge far beyond what his instruments could measure. Leela showed him the forest in more detail. She taught him how to recognize the scent of predators, how to read the stars for direction, and how to predict storms. One day, she pointed to a glowing vine hanging from a tree. "Eat safe," she said. Ethan took a small bite. It was sweet and refreshing, giving him energy he had not felt in weeks. He marveled at how life on Veli had adapted to survive. Despite their work together, conversation was rare. Leela spoke little, and Ethan struggled with her words. Yet small moments began to build understanding. One evening, as they prepared food, Ethan accidentally dropped a basket. Leela glanced at him, then laughed softly. It was the first time she had shown amusement. Ethan laughed too. The moment was fleeting, but it felt like a bridge between them. The villagers began to accept Ethan. At first, some were skeptical. A human who came from another world could not be trusted easily. But when Ethan helped repair a broken water channel, they saw that he did not just take, he gave. When he worked with Leela to create traps for animals that were efficient but did not harm the forest, the villagers noticed his respect for life. Slowly, their suspicion turned to cautious approval. As weeks passed, Ethan learned more about the planet. Veli was not just harsh. It was alive in ways humans rarely understood. Storms could shift direction in seconds, rivers could rise without warning, and some plants moved when touched. Leela explained that these were natural defenses of the planet. She trusted Ethan enough to allow him into the forest alone sometimes, but always with warnings. "Respect, not fight, survive," she said. Ethan memorized her words. They became his survival code. Ethan's feelings toward Leela changed subtly. At first, she was simply the woman he had to live with. Now he noticed her skill, patience, and strength. She was different from anyone he had known on Earth. He admired the way she moved through the forest, how she could make decisions quickly, and how she seemed to understand life on Veli instinctively. Yet he kept his distance. He did not want to force feelings that might be dangerous in a world that already demanded so much of him. One morning, while exploring near a river, Ethan spotted a large animal drinking water. It was bigger than a bear, with 4 legs and scales that reflected green light. Ethan froze. The creature looked at him with bright eyes, then slowly moved away. He exhaled, realizing how lucky he had been. Later, Leela scolded him gently. "Watch, always, not alone, danger," she said. Ethan nodded, understanding that every mistake could cost life here. Leela also began to notice Ethan's efforts. He was not just surviving, he was learning, adapting, and respecting her people. One day, she asked him to help her harvest medicinal plants. Ethan carefully followed her instructions, showing patience and care. Leela nodded, approving his careful movements. For the first time, she considered that humans could be more than outsiders. They could be allies if they were willing to learn. Their bond deepened during nights in the forest. Sometimes they would sit by the fire, listening to the forest hum. Ethan tried to communicate stories about Earth, describing oceans, cities, and forests. Leela listened with interest, even asking simple questions. Ethan realized that sharing stories, even small ones, was a form of trust. Leela, in turn, shared stories of the village, the forest, and the rules that had kept her people alive for generations. Ethan learned that their survival depended on knowledge passed down carefully. One evening, Ethan injured his leg while hunting. Leela worked quietly, applying herbs and wrapping the wound. She hummed a soft tune while working. Ethan felt a strange comfort in her presence. He realized that survival was not just about physical strength. It was about connection, trust, and care. Leela was not only keeping him alive, she was teaching him to live fully in this world. The first conflict arose when some villagers questioned Ethan's intentions. A young hunter argued that humans could betray them as outsiders often did. Leela stepped forward, standing tall. "He learns, respects, bond, alive," she said firmly. Her voice carried weight. The young hunter hesitated, then nodded. Ethan felt a mix of pride and humility. He realized that his actions, not words, mattered here. Ethan also began to experiment with combining human knowledge with native methods. He built small water filters using stones and wood, making them more efficient than the village designs. Leela watched him silently at first, then nodded in approval. Together, they tested traps for animals, combining human logic with native instinct. Small successes like these helped the villagers trust him more. Ethan felt he was finally becoming part of their community, not just a survivor. Despite these successes, tension remained. Ethan still had to follow every rule carefully. A single mistake could endanger him or Leela. Storms could wipe out the village, and predators could strike without warning. Every day required vigilance, patience, and respect. Ethan learned to move quietly, watch the skies, and notice subtle changes in the environment. He realized that surviving on Veli demanded constant attention to both the land and the people who lived there. One night, Leela and Ethan watched the stars together. The sky was a swirl of green, purple, and blue. Ethan pointed to a constellation and told Leela a story about Earth. She listened silently, eyes bright. He realized that their bond was slowly shifting from law and survival toward understanding and companionship. Neither had spoken the word love, but a quiet trust was forming. They depended on each other not only for life, but for guidance and comfort. As weeks turned into months, Ethan's skill grew. He could hunt, gather, and navigate the forest with confidence. He learned the subtle language of the animals, the plants, and even the weather. He became a part of the rhythm of the village. Leela's presence, once a reminder of duty, now became a source of strength and calm. They moved together, worked together, and protected each other. The bond that had been forced by law was slowly becoming real. Yet both knew the bond was fragile. The villagers watched constantly. Storms could come without warning, and predators lurked everywhere. Ethan knew that survival was not guaranteed. But he also knew that if he trusted Layla and respected the village rules, he could thrive. He began to see the planet not as a trap, but as a teacher. Every mistake, every lesson, was a chance to learn and grow stronger. One afternoon, while repairing a water system with Leela, Ethan asked quietly, "Why did you trust me?" Leela looked at him for a long moment. "You try, listen, not fight," she said simply. Ethan nodded. He realized that trust on Veli was earned slowly through actions, not words. He also understood that the bond between them was not just for survival. It was a test, a path to see if a human could respect life in a world far different from Earth. By the end of this part, Ethan had learned the first lesson of life on Veli. Survival was not enough. To truly live, he had to understand, adapt, and respect. He had to see the planet not as a place to conquer, but as a world to belong to. And in the process, he was learning to trust Leela, not just as his guide or his law-bound partner, but as someone who could be his friend, ally, and perhaps something more. The bond of survival was real, but Ethan now understood that the deeper bond of respect and understanding was even stronger. Together, he and Leela were learning to live not just for themselves, but for the planet, the village, and the life that depended on them. Ethan had lived in the village for several months now. He no longer felt like a stranger. He could walk through the forest confidently, climb trees, and avoid predators. The villagers no longer looked at him with suspicion, though their eyes still carried caution. He had earned their trust through work, patience, and respect. Yet Ethan felt there was more to this planet than met the eye. He began exploring areas farther from the village with Leela. She led him carefully, warning him about dangerous plants and animals. One morning, they came to a clearing that seemed out of place. The trees here were twisted, as if burned by some ancient fire, and the ground was cracked. The air felt heavy, and Ethan could see faint lines of glowing light running beneath the soil. Leela stopped. "Here, old, dangerous," she said softly. Ethan knelt and ran his hand over the ground. The energy readings from his portable device spiked. He realized that the planet had hidden forces beneath its surface. He looked at Leela. "What is this?" he asked. She shook her head. "Old humans left, broken things." "Many die," she said quietly. Ethan felt a chill. The forest they had come from seemed safe, but this place spoke of pain, of mistakes long ago. Curious, Ethan carefully examined the area. He found pieces of metal and machinery buried beneath the soil. Some looked old, worn, and covered in plant growth. He realized that humans had come here long before, trying to mine or explore the planet, and left damage behind. Leela watched him quietly, her expression unreadable. Ethan felt guilty. Humans often destroyed what they could not understand. He wondered if he could fix this. Over the next weeks, Ethan and Leela explored more of the planet. Ethan's curiosity grew. He noticed that storms often started near these old human machines. The glowing lines beneath the soil pulsed before the winds rose and the rivers swelled. He began to suspect that the planet itself was reacting to the broken machines. Something deep in the land, in the trees, and in the rivers was alive, trying to correct the damage humans had caused. Leela began to trust Ethan with more than survival lessons. She showed him sacred places in the forest where only the villagers could go. There the soil was soft, the plants thrived, and water ran clear. She explained that these areas had been protected for generations. She said that the balance of the planet depended on care, respect, and knowledge. Ethan realized that surviving on Veli was not just about avoiding danger, it was about understanding the planet itself. Ethan wanted to help. He asked Leela how he could fix the broken machines. She looked at him skeptically. "Humans destroy, not fix," she said. Ethan nodded. He understood the risk. If he tried and failed, he could make things worse. But he could not ignore the problem. The planet was in pain, and every storm, every predator, every danger was connected to the broken systems humans left behind. Together, they began small experiments. Ethan used his knowledge of mechanics and electricity, combined with Leela's understanding of the land. They repaired minor devices that controlled water flow, helping the rivers to return to normal. They moved fallen logs to protect plant life and cleared toxic growth from areas near the village. Each success strengthened their trust. Ethan realized that the villagers' knowledge and human science together could heal some of the damage. While working, Ethan and Leela began to talk more. Leela asked him about Earth, about humans, and about other planets he had visited. Ethan spoke honestly, explaining that humans often made mistakes, but some tried to learn and protect. Leela listened carefully. She told him about past outsiders who had destroyed parts of Veli, leaving poison in the soil and creating storms that killed many villagers. Ethan understood why the people here were cautious with him. One afternoon, they came across a machine partially buried under a hill. It was larger than any Ethan had seen before, with glowing tubes and spinning gears. The ground around it was dead, no plants grew. Ethan realized this machine was the cause of many storms. He explained to Leela that if they could shut it down, the planet would calm. She hesitated. "Danger die humans cannot," she said. Ethan looked at her and nodded. "I understand, but I must try. We can do it together." Leela finally agreed, though her eyes showed fear. They worked for days, studying the machine from a distance. Ethan noted its energy patterns, while Leela showed him how to move safely without alerting dangerous animals nearby. At night, they slept under the stars, sharing stories quietly. The bond between them deepened. They no longer spoke only out of duty. Small smiles, gentle gestures, and quiet moments connected them. Ethan began to realize that survival had brought them together, but understanding and respect were creating something more. Finally, Ethan attempted to disable the machine. He carefully removed damaged components and redirected the energy flow. Sparks flew and the ground trembled slightly. Leela held his hand, steadying him as if to share strength. The machine hissed, then fell silent. Ethan exhaled, exhausted but relieved. Leela looked at him with pride. "You help planet life," she said simply. Ethan smiled. He knew that this success meant more than surviving, it meant healing. But their work was not done. They discovered that multiple machines were scattered across the planet, each creating imbalance. Ethan realized that fixing all of them would take months, maybe years. Yet he felt determined. He had a purpose now beyond survival. He wanted to protect the planet, the village, and Leela. The challenge excited him, and he welcomed it. The villagers noticed the changes too. Rivers flowed more steadily, storms became less violent, and animals returned to areas they had avoided. Some of the elders began to see Ethan not just as an outsider, but as a helper. Still, they watched carefully, knowing that one mistake could bring disaster. Ethan understood that trust here was fragile and had to be earned continuously. One day, while repairing a smaller machine near the forest edge, Ethan spotted a shadow moving in the trees. A predator, larger than any he had faced before, crept toward them. He grabbed a makeshift spear, ready to defend himself and Leela. She nodded, pulling her bow from her back. Together they fought. Ethan thrust, Leela shot arrows. After a tense struggle, the predator ran away, wounded but alive. They both exhaled, hearts pounding. The moment showed them that their survival depended on working as one. Over time, Ethan's respect for the planet grew. He saw how every action mattered, the way a branch was moved, the way water flowed, the way the forest healed. He realized that humans could learn, adapt, and even restore what they had broken. Leela noticed the change in him. He was no longer just a human survivor. He had become a protector of Veli, someone who understood its life and its dangers. As the days passed, Ethan also noticed something inside himself changing. He cared for Leela not only as a guide or a companion, but as someone he could trust deeply. He wanted her safety above all. He felt a strange warmth when she smiled, a quiet comfort when she spoke. Yet he did not push. He knew that love could not be forced here, just as survival could not. It had to grow naturally, like the plants in the forest they protected. One night, they camped near a river that reflected the green sky. Ethan spoke quietly. "I did not come here to stay forever. I wanted to explore, to learn. But now, I think I want to help. I want to protect this planet." Leela looked at him, her eyes reflecting the water. "You understand life, not take respect," she said. Ethan nodded. He realized that she was not only teaching him about the planet, but also about being human in a better way, kind, careful, and responsible. The deeper secrets of the planet revealed themselves slowly. Ethan learned that storms were not random, that predators had patterns, and that the forest had its own intelligence. He understood that every machine left by humans had consequences, and every repair they made could save lives. The villagers relied on him not just for knowledge but for courage and action. Leela's trust grew alongside their bond, creating a partnership neither had expected when their marriage was first forced by law. By the end of this part, Ethan had changed. He was no longer a helpless survivor. He was a human learning to live fully in an alien world, respecting its rules and its life. He was a partner to Leela, a friend to the villagers, and a protector of the planet. He realized that survival was only the beginning. True life meant understanding, learning, and caring for something greater than oneself. Ethan and Leela stood together on a hill, looking over the forest and the village. The sun of Veli cast green and purple light over the trees. Ethan reached for Leela's hand. She hesitated, then held it. No words were needed. Their bond had grown beyond survival, beyond duty. They were partners in life, in protection, and in understanding. The planet had tested them both, and together they had begun to heal it. And themselves, the sky over Veli had been quiet for weeks. The rivers ran clear, the animals returned to the forests, and the village was calm. Ethan and Leela worked together each day, repairing old machines, clearing dead areas, and teaching the villagers safer ways to live in harmony with the planet. Yet the calm was not permanent. Ethan noticed subtle changes. The wind shifted strangely, the rivers grew restless, and the sky glowed faintly green. He knew that a storm was coming. He warned Leela. "This is not normal. The machines we repaired, they are fine. Something else. It will be strong," he said. Leela's eyes darkened. She nodded. "Storm, bigger, more danger. Village must prepare," she said. Ethan felt the weight of responsibility. He had survived before, but this was different. This storm could destroy everything, the village, the forest, and the fragile trust he had built. The elders called a council. Ethan and Leela attended. The elders' faces were grim. One elder spoke first in the native language, then Leela translated slowly. "Storm comes, outsiders curse. Some say, send away, survive alone. Law, humans, danger." Ethan felt a cold weight settle in his chest. They were considering casting him out, believing that he might bring harm. He understood. The planet had tested many humans before, and their mistakes had caused pain. But he also knew he could help save the village if they allowed him. Ethan stepped forward. "I understand your fear," he said quietly. "But I have studied the machines, the land, and the forest. I know what is coming. I can help protect the village. I will not leave." Leela placed her hand on his shoulder. Her eyes were steady. The elders whispered among themselves. Tension filled the clearing. Ethan knew that the next hours could decide his life. After much discussion, the elders allowed Ethan to stay, but under strict observation. Leela stayed by his side, silently supporting him. The village worked tirelessly, reinforcing huts, gathering food and water, and preparing safe zones for children and the elderly. Ethan moved with them, helping to organize and repair protective barriers. He realized that his role had changed. He was no longer just a survivor. He was now a leader, working alongside the villagers to face an unimaginable threat. As the storm approached, the wind howled like a living creature. The sky turned dark green, and lightning struck in strange patterns. Rivers rose rapidly, and distant trees cracked under the force of the wind. Ethan and Leela worked side by side, ensuring everyone was safe. Children huddled with elders, while hunters reinforced the outer edges of the village. Ethan checked every barrier, every trap, every escape route. He could feel the planet's anger and knew that if they did not act correctly, lives would be lost. Suddenly, a massive lightning strike hit near the village's water supply. Ethan ran with Leela to assess the damage. The pump had been destroyed, and water began to flood nearby huts. Ethan's knowledge of machinery was the only thing that could save them. He quickly repaired the pump using spare parts and native materials. Leela assisted, holding tools and steadying him. Together, they restored the water flow just as a huge gust tore through the village. The elders watched silently. Some were skeptical, fearing that the storm's fury could overcome human skill. Others began to see that Ethan was not just a survivor, but someone who could act decisively and protect the village. Leela's presence reassured them. She had chosen to trust him, and her faith in his abilities spoke volumes. The storm raged for days. Wind, rain, and lightning battered the village. Predators driven from the forest prowled the outskirts. Ethan and Leela led patrols, checking huts, reinforcing barriers, and guiding villagers to safety. Ethan was exhausted, but he could not stop. Every moment mattered. Every decision could mean life or death. He had to be careful, precise, and fast. During a particularly violent night, the largest predator Ethan had ever seen approached the village. It was massive, with glowing eyes and sharp claws. It moved quickly, tearing at trees and huts. Ethan grabbed his makeshift spear, while Leela knocked an arrow to her bow. Together, they acted in perfect sync. Ethan distracted the beast, while Leela fired arrows that slowed it down. Finally, the predator retreated into the storm, leaving the village intact. The villagers cheered quietly, but the elders' eyes were still watchful. They had seen the danger firsthand and recognized Ethan's courage. As the storm began to subside, the elders called another council. They gathered in the main hut, wet and tired but alive. Leela translated the elders' words slowly. "You survive, protect, humans, some say, proof, belongs, village." Ethan nodded. He realized that this was the final test. He had survived the storm, protected the village, and shown that he could respect life and the planet. The elders would now decide if he truly belonged. One elder stepped forward, his eyes fixed on Ethan. "Many humans fail, destroy, not learn. You different, prove courage, respect. Village life, I trust your bond real." Ethan took a deep breath. He looked at Leela, who nodded silently. He met the elder's gaze. "I have tried my best. I respect this land, the people, and the life here. I will continue to protect them no matter the cost," he said firmly. The elders whispered among themselves. After a long pause, they nodded. The verdict was clear. Ethan's place in the village was accepted. Leela stepped forward. "You safe belong with us," she said softly. Ethan felt a wave of relief. He had not just survived the storm, he had passed the true test. The bond that had begun as a law for survival was now stronger. It was based on trust, courage, and mutual respect. Ethan understood that his role was no longer temporary. He was part of this world, part of this community. In the following days, the villagers began to repair the damage caused by the storm. Ethan and Leela worked tirelessly, teaching new methods to prevent future damage. They combined human tools with native knowledge, creating systems that were stronger and more resilient. The villagers began to see that humans, when careful and respectful, could help heal the planet rather than harm it. Ethan also began to understand the deeper lessons of Veli. Survival was not just about food, water, and shelter. It was about understanding the land, respecting its power, and learning to work with it rather than against it. He realized that the storm had tested more than his skill. It had tested his character, his patience, and his willingness to respect life in all forms. Leela noticed changes in Ethan as well. He was no longer just a human outsider trying to survive. He had become a protector, a partner, and a friend. She saw the way he cared for the villagers, the way he respected the forest, and the way he took responsibility for every action. Slowly she began to see him not just as a bonded husband, but as someone she could trust completely. One evening, after the storm had passed, Ethan and Leela walked together along the river. The water flowed gently, reflecting the soft light of Veli's twin moons. Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the peace of the land. "We survived," he said quietly. Leela nodded. "We survived together," she replied. Ethan realized that this survival was more than physical. It was emotional, spiritual, and connected to the bond they shared. The villagers gathered for a small celebration, not for joy alone, but for life itself. They shared food, told stories, and thanked the spirits of the forest for protection. Ethan watched, feeling a deep sense of belonging. He had earned respect, trust, and a place in this world. The law that had forced him to marry Leela had begun as a rule for survival, but now it had created something stronger, a partnership, a bond, and a shared life. As night fell, Ethan looked up at the stars. He thought of Earth, of his old life, and of the journey that had brought him here. He realized that surviving on Veli required more than courage and skill. It required respect, humility, and the ability to learn from the planet and its people. He felt a quiet pride in what he had accomplished, but he also knew that challenges would come again. Storms, predators, and hidden dangers still existed. Yet he was no longer afraid. He had Leela, the villagers, and the planet itself guiding him. Before sleep, Leela sat beside him. She looked at him silently for a long time. Finally, she said, "Storm test, trust, bond real." Ethan smiled and nodded. He reached for her hand and she allowed him to hold it. The gesture was simple, but it meant more than words. They had survived together, faced danger, and earned respect. The bond between them was no longer just law, it was real, built on trust, courage, and shared life. Ethan realized something important that night. Surviving Veli was no longer his goal. Protecting it, understanding it, and being part of its life had become his purpose. He knew that love and respect could grow even in the harshest places, and that humans could belong to worlds far from their own if they chose humility and care over fear and selfishness. As the village slept peacefully, Ethan and Leela remained awake a little longer. They listened to the gentle hum of the forest, the soft trickle of the river, and the distant call of nocturnal creatures. They had survived the storm, proved their loyalty, and begun to heal the damage of the past. The planet was still dangerous, but for the first time, Ethan felt he was truly at home after the storm. The village slowly returned to life. Broken huts were repaired, water channels cleared, and fields replanted. The villagers worked together, their movements steady and careful, guided by lessons learned during the storm. Ethan and Leela moved among them, helping where they could, teaching new methods and observing how the land responded. The forest itself seemed calmer, as if the storm had been a test for all who lived here. Ethan had changed. No longer just a survivor, he had become a part of the village and the planet. His bond with Leela was no longer forced by law. It had grown into trust, respect, and quiet affection. He watched her move through the forest, her bow in hand, her eyes alert, and felt a warmth in his chest. She noticed him too, often smiling in small, careful ways that made him feel seen and accepted. The elders called a meeting in the central clearing. Ethan and Leela stood together, surrounded by villagers. The elders spoke in their language, Leela translating slowly. "Storm, pass, life, saved, humans proved belong," she said. Ethan realized that the elders were acknowledging him not just as a helper, but as a true member of their community. The village had accepted him fully, and with that acceptance came new responsibilities. Ethan spent his days working with the villagers to restore balance to the planet. Together, they repaired remaining machines, cleared toxic areas, and planted new life. He learned more about the forest than ever before, the behavior of animals, the movement of rivers, and the way plants communicated through subtle changes in light and sound. Every action he took had purpose, every choice affected life. He realized that humanity's strength was not in domination, but in understanding, adaptation, and care. Leela taught him how to track storms before they formed, how to read the stars for long-distance navigation, and how to listen to the forest for signs of danger. Ethan shared human knowledge too, building small devices to monitor energy patterns in the soil and river flow. Together, they combined native wisdom and human technology to make the village stronger. Villagers watched and learned, gaining confidence that humans could help rather than harm. Their bond deepened naturally. One evening they were alone, repairing a broken bridge over a stream. Ethan handed Leela a wooden plank, their hands brushing lightly. She looked at him, her eyes reflecting the green light of the planet. For the first time, neither spoke about duty or law. The silence was comfortable, full of understanding. Ethan realized that love could grow in the quiet moments, in shared work, and in mutual care. The village children began to follow Ethan and Leela everywhere. They watched as Ethan repaired machines and taught them safe ways to play near the river. Leela showed them how to hunt small game and identify edible plants. The children's laughter filled the air, a sound Ethan had almost forgotten existed in a world so dangerous. He smiled, realizing that his presence here was making a difference beyond survival. It was creating hope for the next generation. As months passed, the forest around the village healed. Rivers ran clear, plants flourished, and the animals returned to balance. Ethan walked among them, noting the subtle changes. Predators were still present, but fewer, controlled by the natural balance restored by careful work. He understood that healing a planet took patience, respect, and cooperation. No single person could do it alone. One day, while exploring a distant ridge, Ethan and Leela discovered the last of the broken machines. It was massive, older than any other, buried under layers of rock and soil. Ethan studied it carefully, realizing that this machine had caused much of the long-term imbalance on Veli. Leela looked at him, concern in her eyes. "Danger, must careful," she said. Ethan nodded. "I can fix it." "We can fix it together." They worked for hours, combining human ingenuity and native skill, finally shutting down the machine. The ground trembled, then settled. Life returned even more fully than before. The villagers noticed immediately. Rivers stabilized, the soil became fertile, and the forest seemed to breathe easier. They celebrated quietly, understanding that this was not just a victory of humans or natives, but a triumph for life itself. Ethan looked at Leela, seeing the pride in her eyes. They had done more than survive. They had healed the land and strengthened the village for generations to come. That evening, as the sun set with green and purple light across the sky, Ethan and Leela walked together along a high ridge. The wind was gentle, carrying the scent of flowers and fresh water. Ethan reached for her hand, and she took it without hesitation. They walked in silence, understanding that words were not always needed to express connection, trust, or love. The bond that had begun as a rule for survival had grown into a partnership, strong and real. Ethan reflected on how far he had come. He had arrived on Veli as a human explorer, alone and unprepared for the dangers of the planet. He had been forced to marry Leela to survive. Yet through respect, patience, and care, he had not only survived but thrived. He had learned to respect life, understand the planet, and work alongside those who knew it best. He had discovered that humanity's greatest power was not weapons or machines, but the ability to adapt, learn, and form bonds of trust. Layla, walking beside him, thought about Ethan too. She had been skeptical of humans, believing they only took and left destruction behind. But Ethan had shown her patience, skill, and respect. He had not rushed, not forced, and not destroyed. He had listened, learned, and acted to protect life. She realized that love could grow in unexpected ways, even from what began as law and duty. The village began to thrive. Children played safely, adults worked together, and elders guided the community with renewed confidence. Ethan continued to teach human knowledge, while learning more about native ways each day. Leela's guidance was invaluable, and together, they led the village toward a future that balanced human ingenuity and native wisdom. One day, a signal finally reached the village from orbit. A human ship had detected Ethan's presence and was coming to rescue him. He felt a pang of emotion. Earth called to him, offering return to his old life. But as he looked at the village, at Layla, and at the thriving forest, he realized he could not leave. This world, the people, and the life he had helped protect had become his home. He turned to Leela. "I stay," he said simply. She smiled, her hand tight in his. "You belong," she replied. Ethan's choice was not just about survival or love, it was about responsibility and respect. He had found a place where he could make a difference, protect life, and live fully. Leela and the villagers understood his decision, and together they looked forward to building a future where humans and natives worked in harmony with the planet, not against it. As night fell, the village gathered for a quiet celebration. They shared food, told stories, and gave thanks for life, survival, and the bond between people. Ethan and Leela sat together, watching the stars reflected in the calm rivers. They did not need words. The bond between them was real, formed through shared danger, respect, and trust. The planet itself seemed at peace, its forests, rivers, and creatures thriving under careful stewardship. Ethan reflected on everything he had learned. Survival had been the first step. Understanding, respect, and trust had followed. And finally, through action and care, a deeper bond had grown, one that went beyond law or duty. He realized that humanity's greatest strength was not in conquering worlds, but in belonging to them, protecting them, and forming true partnerships with the life within them. Leela leaned against him, her hand in his. "We together protect life," she said softly. Ethan nodded. He knew that their work was far from over. Storms, predators, and hidden dangers would always be part of life on Veli, but together they were stronger. Together they had survived, healed, and grown. Together they belonged. As the moons of Veli rose in the sky, casting green and purple light across the village and forest, Ethan understood a truth he had never known before. Survival was only the beginning. Life, love, and purpose came from connection, care, and respect. He smiled, squeezing Leela's hand, knowing that whatever challenges came next, they would face them as partners, protectors, and guardians of a world they both called home. The story of Ethan and Leela, of survival, trust, and human ingenuity, had reached a new chapter. The village thrived, the planet healed, and humanity's strength, its ability to learn, adapt, and love, shone brightly in the forests and rivers of Veli. The bond that had begun as a law for survival had become real, and it would guide them both toward a future full of life, respect, and hope.